But, well, let me still ask you to give at least a shot at a definition of what it should be. Don't you think that it's been helpful to allow, people to use one currency across this group of nations, to allow people and businesses, commerce to travel freely across borders without having to deal with all the red tape and regulation that came with doing business cross-border before the EU?
Well, clearly, you just had that debate leave, remain in the UK, and there were arguments, and I'm an economist, so you have arguments, frankly, on both sides, and the question of political sovereignty and immigration was also very much part of that debate. So I think that in any given country, you'd probably have, frankly, a different answer to that question. Again, the U.S. view on the EU shouldn't be pro or anti-EU. We're simply trying to deal with whatever constellation the Europeans put forward as a way of kind of European investment and in terms of European economic integration.
As an economist who, studied at Yale and Oxford, and I believe Margaret Thatcher once called you her global Sherpa, what do you think about the basic idea of, free trade? What do you think about, barriers, regulatory and national border and otherwise, being struck down to allow people and money to transition across them easily?
Well, on the whole, economists, and I would put myself in that category, favor free trade, have favored free trade, see the benefits of free trade, see the economic growth that is spurred by free trade. However, increasingly, it's clear that we need a degree of fair trade as well, so that we have to look at the imbalances that are, struck up in the international system, and sometimes either currencies or countries manipulate trade to their own advantage. Obviously, there's dumping of goods in global markets and even manipulation of currency. So I think part of what President Trump and, frankly, his new Economic Trade Council under Professor Navarro will be doing is looking at some of these questions with greater scrutiny to see, in fact, in our future bilateral relations and bilateral treaties that there would be a fairer notion of this free trade.
Professor, you bring up Mr. Navarro. Let's talk a little bit about currencies. Isn't there a danger that if we were to see a weakening of the EU, that we would see a weakening of the euro, and that would lead to a strengthening of the dollar, and that wouldn't necessarily be good for US workers?
So we have witnessed already a weakening in the euro. Depending on which time frame you're looking at. And again, I'm not a currency market analyst.
But it could have a significant impact on...
Indeed. But most of the people in the market that I talk to, most of the economists at investment banks, money center banks, are suggesting even in the immediate future that there could be parity between the US dollar and the euro. There are other places in hedge funds where they're actually making fairly large bets against the euro. They see the downside risks, some of which are political risks, or the coming apart, frankly, of the euro.
That's a good thing or a bad thing?
This is a good thing. It's an objective thing. It's happening. It has been happening. We have to deal with it as it happens. Would it lead potentially to a stronger dollar? Yes, it could. Would interest rates in the United States also lead to a stronger dollar if they are creeping up, as some people expect? Yes.
Is Germany abusing the currency?
Peter Navarro has a study. Other economists have made similar studies. It probably depends on which time series you're looking at, over which period you're looking at the data. It looks to me like, at least on one, if not two of the categories of currency manipulation, Germany has tilted the tables towards itself, to the disadvantage, frankly, of Southern Europe or periphery Europe, and that would be particularly Spain, Portugal, Italy, and Greece. No, I'm saying the euro has been.
But what about the United States? Is it to the disadvantage of the United States?
Is it to the yes, it is grossly to the disadvantage of the United States, because it leads to cheap exports coming from Germany and flooding even the U.S. market.
Let's talk a little bit about Greece. You talked about it very briefly there. Do you think that the administration has a view on what the IMF's role should be within the Greek bailout package?
I'm not privy to that view. I haven't been part of any of those discussions. I'm frankly not in the administration. I'm in this period of abeyance.
You've had discussions.
I've had discussions. I think there is question, frankly, about whether there should be a bailout and whose responsibility that bailout would be, and why Greece continues in the same kind of stagnating situation that it's found itself over the last period of years, and why this situation hasn't been solved.
Do you think Greece should leave the EU?
I don't want to speak for the Greeks, but I think there is probably, from an economist's perspective, a very strong reason for Greece moving away from the euro.